So as I said, my name is Angel Sampaio, and I think we're going to go ahead and start with some quick housekeeping items first. So there are a couple ways for you to communicate with us today. Of course, the chat is where most of you are dropping in your name, organization, and your role within the organization. We really want to know who's here today and be able to facilitate those kind of connections. And as far as utilizing chat, we want to share reactions, ideas, and resources. And then there's the Q&A component also. We would love for you all to submit your questions for the panelists there directly, because the panelists will be seeing the Q&A easier than the chat. And then we can also just go through the questions accordingly. We hope we'll have time to answer all the Q&As by the end of the call. But if not, of course, we'd love to be able to answer those at a later time. And also, as far as this call, at the end of the call, we will have a 1 question short survey. And you also see the emails also provided there as well. So if you have any additional questions, you want to reach out to the network team, please do that. And we will also make the recording for this webinar available in about 3 business days or so. All right. Next slide, please, Kayla. Great, thank you. And so to meet the panelists, we have Brent Toellner. He's a Senior Director of Lifesaving Programs at Best Friends Animal Society. We have Dr. Colleen. She's a National Shelter Medicine Veterinarian. And we have Faith Wright, Director of Operations with Brandywine Valley SPCA. So again, Brent, Dr. Colleen, and I are all from Best Friends, and I'm the moderator for today. All right, great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and start off with Dr. Colleen. If you can please kick us off with an overview of the relationship between daily population rounds, pathway planning, and animal welfare as a whole.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks, Angel. So yeah, we have these concepts that help us move animals through the shelter as quickly as possible while also maximizing how much they can enjoy their stay with us, right? And so we have pathway planning, which is a proactive process that maps out an animal's ideal pathway from intake or before intake to outcome, whatever that outcome may be. Things like return to owner, adoption, transfer, return to field are possible ideas we're thinking about when we're talking about pathway planning. So we have automated steps that happen for animals on specific pathways. For example, we might have a dog that comes in with a fresh haircut and a collar. So when we see some of these things, when an animal first comes in the shelter, we may assign them a specific pathway of return to owner. We think that this particular pet has an owner out there in the world. And so we do specific steps to help facilitate that pathway. And that might include things like being sure that we follow up for any microchip, we post them on social media, we may go door to door in their neighborhood. If they have a fresh haircut, we may even call grooming facilities. We're doing everything in our power to get them back to their owner. And then we have daily population rounds, which is a cross-department systematic approach of looking at every animal in your shelter every day. And we're looking at a few questions when we do this. We want to make sure that we know who they are, how they're doing, and how they get out of the shelter. So we use daily population rounds as kind of these daily checks on our pathway plan of, are we where we need to be? Do we need to do anything different, both on an individual animal welfare basis and on a population health basis. So when we use both these consistent structured approaches, we can minimize the time that they're in care and also reduce their stress-related illness or deterioration. So overall, we're enhancing their welfare and we're expediting their process through the shelter. Does that make sense?
That does. Thank you, Dr. Colleen. And again, a reminder for everybody, if you want to drop your Q&A, please do that. And we'll try to get to that towards the end of today's call. So all of you are probably here because you have an interest in this topic, I'm hoping. And at one point or another, you've probably had the challenge of space, right? And so as far as how long animals take up space in your shelters. And so today we really wanted to dive into how pathway planning can play a key role in navigating these challenges. So Brent, we're going to pass it to you now. At what point should we start thinking of a path for an animal that enters a shelter?
I mean, as soon as you become aware or come in contact with the pet. So, you know, it's as soon as they hit your shelter doors, obviously that's a really good time to know, as Dr. Colleen mentioned, you know, if it comes in with a fresh groomed haircut, collar, microchip, we can kind of fast track that towards a potential or likely return to home candidate. But similarly, if we know the animals, like your staff at your shelter knows the animals that come into your shelter that are likely long stay candidates, like we know our blocky headed dogs can tend to stay a little bit longer. We know that if you have a cat with FIV or FELV, that they're a long stay candidate. And so you can start working them as a long stay candidate, even while before they become long stay. We should start that process as soon as they hit the shelter doors, as opposed to waiting, until they've been there for 60 days. And it's like, oh, wow, this animal's still here. Well, we knew that probably coming in. And so as soon as you come in contact with the animal, that's the best time to start. And that could even happen before they hit the shelter doors. So there are things like if you're doing a managed intake program, I recommend everybody do some sort of a managed intake program, and you become aware of a pet that may have an appointment. Say you have a German Shepherd that's coming in on Monday for an appointment, and you have a rescue group that pulls a lot of your German Shepherds for you. Well, you can start networking that German Shepherd to that rescue group before they even arrive, so that that group has a chance to find a foster home. And so you can even start that on a managed intake process before they hit the shelter doors. But I always encourage people, like, make a plan right away. You can steer it, when you're doing the daily rounds, as Colleen talked about. You can, and we've realized, okay, hey, we never did find that owner. We can then divert them to a different path, but start them on a path as soon as you become aware or come in contact with the pet.
That actually was my next question. So thank you so much for addressing that already, Brent. So that was basically to find out, pathway planning, how it can often start before the animal even enters the shelter. And we know that, as Brent was speaking about, doing things proactively, there's a lot of really great community programs also that are in place to be able to help before the animal even enters the shelter. So thank you for that, Brent. All right, Dr. Colleen. So we keep on talking about time as a key consideration. So how does length of stay impact an animal's health once they're in the shelter?
Yeah, this is such an interesting concept because sometimes, we may not even know how long animals in our shelter are staying on average, but it's a piece of data that we need to know and we need to track, and we should have goals around just length of stay. And this is because of its direct link to animal health, right? So there's a few different reasons why length of stay and animal health are related. So the first most obvious one is that shelters, no matter how well we do it, when you have a bunch of animals together, there's a risk of being exposed to disease. And, this is where I think of the shelter like I think of a daycare, right? So there's just inherently germs everywhere. So all sorts of different diseases coming in from the public and mixing together. So when the length of stay is longer, the chance of being exposed to a disease is higher. So that's just the reality. The second piece that may not be as intuitive is the cumulative effect of stress. So when we think about how animals experience the shelter, no matter what their background is, so whether they came from a home or whether they were truly a stray or whether they were even in a cruelty or neglect case, the shelter is still new and therefore stressful, no matter how well we do it. And so this cumulative effect of stress can decrease animals' immunity and cause them to be more susceptible to disease. So in shelter medicine, we have this not so fun fact that if you keep a cat in a shelter for 21 days and you do everything perfectly, it is still more than likely that they will get an upper respiratory infection. We have data around this. So even if we do biosecurity perfectly, even if we are meeting all of their needs and have great welfare, if we keep them for 21 days, they will get sick. And so when we think about this piece, the stress piece and the effect of cumulative stress, it can't be emphasized enough how important it is to get them out. A goal I love to see for organizations is having a goal length of stay less than 14 days. So from a behavioral health standpoint and a disease prevention standpoint, we really want to decrease the number of days that they're in the building. I think there's this other piece, and it's population management and health when we're talking about average length of stay. So when we look at our daily capacity, so how many animals we can house or in a day, we look at daily intake multiplied by average length of stay. So if we can decrease our average length of stay, we can reduce the number of animals we have on site. And maybe that is not a goal you need. Maybe you have plenty of capacity. I don't know anyone who has that problem, but if you do, then that just means you can help more animals in a year. So we have 3 different factors here to look at, right? So exposure to disease, cumulative stress effect on the immune system, and crowding, overcapacity, these things that cause both animal wellness and human wellness to decline. So there's 3 different factors there we can think about when we're linking health and length of stay.
So Dr. Colleen, can you expand a little bit more on, talking about time, of course, is a really big part of this discussion as far as length of time. You've also discussed like the impact of space. So when we are developing a pathway for an animal, why should we consider housing? How is that important? What role does that play in this?
This is such a fun question. I love thinking about our shelters and how we can maximize our space to best meet the needs of the animals in our care. So when we think about all of the different housing units or spaces that could exist in our shelter, we want to make sure that we're using them intentionally. So when we assign a pathway to an animal, I'm going to use the easiest example I can think of. So maybe a cat that comes in that is under socialized, or maybe it's not, and its ultimate pathway is returning to the field. And you have an idea of how long that should take or what it means in your organization. And that's one thing. But how do we choose housing for these cats that they're not on the pathway to adoption? And so some things we might think about is we don't need to use our visible adopter-friendly spaces for these cats. They may be better off somewhere with very low foot traffic because they're not used to confinement. We want to keep them as far away from any barking dogs as possible. And it may not be one of your conventional housing units because we can house these cats to better suit their needs and also optimize others' pathway by not using other housing units. And so I think that is a really good example. This other concept that comes up a lot is where do we put our fast track animals? So it depends. In each community, I try not to like readily define fast track because I think fast track in Los Angeles can look different than fast track in Southern Louisiana. So I think it's important to think about your community and look at your numbers. What does your community see as fast tracked? And try not to have too much bias around what you individually think, like really look at your data, who flies off the shelves in your shelter. But where do we put them? And so there's a few different ideas around where we should put our fast track animals. So, one camp is that we should have them readily visible for everyone to see so that they can fly off the shelves. And I am in that camp sometimes. The other camp is we should put them mixed in with some of our slower track animals. So if you come in to see the Yorkie puppy that you saw online, you have to walk by 9 blocky-headed dogs that have been sitting there for 30 days on your way and maybe fall in love with one of them. So we have a great example of this from one of our own centers. We had been putting all of our fast track cute kittens right by the door. And then we were putting all of our long stay adult cats upstairs. And what we found is if we took one of those long stay cats and we put them downstairs with the kittens, they got adopted in 2 days. And so while I don't think there's a right answer for this, I just think it's important to pay attention to. So when you're thinking about where you're going to put an animal in a shelter, collect data over time. Look at this. If I put my long stay animal in this area, does it have any effect on its length of stay? And vice versa with your fast tracks. I always think it's fascinating to have like a heat map of your own shelter. Where do people go? Where do people spend the most time? And understand that about your shelter and play with things. So I think the biggest piece here is being intentional. So you don't need to just throw animals around the shelter willy-nilly and see what happens. Be really intentional about our housing choices.
And Angel, if I can, I would also like to just add on to that is that that can change depending on your situation. If you're running at 80% capacity, then you may want to intermingle some animals, some of your fast-tracked animals with some of your harder to adopt because the urgency isn't necessarily there for that. But if you're making space-based euthanasia decisions this afternoon, then you're going to want to fast-track as many animals out as you possibly can. So that may change just depending on what your shelter population is and your situation is at the moment. So don't fall in love with anything that you're doing. Be open to changing it as the need arises.
Thank you for that, Brent. And Faith, I know you just joined, but I
I've had technical difficulties. So sorry. So for everything that I've gone through with working through many overcrowded shelters, for us, what always has worked the very best is to try to stop the intake at the beginning even. So I don't know what y'all have talked about already, because like I said, we were having some difficulties. But finder to foster, intake diversion, let's keep them from even coming into the shelter. Let's talk about, hi guys, you need to bring this animal. Okay, I get it. Let me vaccinate it now. Let me have time to try to find placement for it. I will get this animal in from you. I just did this today, actually, here in Brandywine Valley SPCA. We had a family come in late Monday night. We had not a single kennel open for 4 kittens. We vaccinated them. They came today and we had a foster pick them up within 10 minutes of them getting here. So those kind of things can also happen. But again, I'm not sure where I'm joining in the process of the conversation. So sorry.
No, that's perfect, Faith. And we did discuss that a little bit earlier, but this is perfect timing to add those comments as well, because we talked about pathway planning, of course, once the animal enters the shelter, but also what can we do proactively before the animal even enters the shelter. So that's absolutely perfect. I'm really glad that you're here. So thank you. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties to get you on, but we're glad you're here now. So one thing, Faith, is I know that in Houston, I got really involved in animal welfare because I would find stray dogs in the street or dogs that were really just lost, needed to get back home. And I became really involved with a few of the rescue groups here and fostered quite a bit. And so I normally foster, I like to foster, I should say, like the mamas of newborn babies or the really young puppies. And the group that I foster for here, since I've started with them, has been like 400 plus little animals entering my home. And it's very much short-term fostering that I do primarily, but also do some long-term fostering on occasion as well. So of course, being with the network team, we have some phenomenal rescue partners that we work with. And of course, everybody is just working collectively. But if you can kind of tell us more about the important role that a foster program plays in the housing option and in pathway planning as a whole that you've experienced with your organization and with your community.
Definitely. So for us, for any organization that I've ever worked with, fostering is a primary tool to go ahead and increase your shelter capacity. One thing that I'm seeing at some shelters that I've gone to, they're like, oh, we can't let our medical cases go to foster. That's not true. The medical team leaves at 6 o'clock in the evening. They don't come back until 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning. A foster is home all night long. So I actually did a presentation on Tuesday where I presented, I've only been in Delaware for about 5 months, and I've already fostered almost 50 animals in Delaware. All were medical cases, bottle babies, paralyzed, you name it, whatever. It's a big thing to get your medical team to understand that we can increase our shelter capacity through foster homes. Also, nope, everybody wants to say, oh, but it's already adoptable age. It can just stay here. But are they getting adopted? Could they go to a foster and then that foster advocates them to their neighbor, their friend, their aunt, their uncle, their grandma, their grandpa, whoever. There's just a lot of different places that the kittens, sorry, I have a kitten climbing up my leg right now, my foster kitten. There's just a lot of different ways that you can get fosters in tune to what you're doing, and you can include them in your shelter capacity. So it's a really big deal. I just saw somebody ask, how do we deal with foster emergencies? We are fortunate here with Brandywine Valley SPCA that we do have 2 emergency contracts with hospitals. I am on call 24/7 with them. So I do send kittens that are in, crashing capacity, things like that. They will go to one of our hospitals at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'll pick them up at 8 in the morning, things like that. But I know that like Austin Pets Alive is another example. They have an overnight veterinarian, vet tech person that is there to handle those kind of calls. So there are ways to still do the overnight, but fosters can absolutely 100% lessen your capacity that you have at your shelter.
I can, oh, me and Brent were both jumping in.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about expanding vet capacity because I'm sure not everyone on here has a veterinarian or the ability to send animals to the emergency. Well, I think those are amazing options. I am passionate about expanding veterinary capacity. So I think when you get creative, other ideas in addition to emergency hospitals and veterinarians, I often work in shelters where there's no veterinarian in a 2-hour radius. So how do we manage this? And so I think there's telehealth in some states. So there's services you can use that help triage emergencies for your fosters and at least help them decide if it needs to be seen tonight or tomorrow. And then those triage services can then contact a person at your facility and tell you whether they need to be seen or not. Training personnel on your staff with triage protocols can be really a helpful tool to help fosters understand what is an emergency and what is not. I would say 9 times out of 10, someone just put a link to one of the telehealth services. Thank you. 9 times out of 10, a foster is just concerned and they don't actually know whether it's an emergency or not. So I wanted to add that piece. And third is, how do we get veterinary care at our rural shelters is like this broader question, while it's also like tied into this question. And I'm really passionate about veterinary vet of record, memorandums of understanding. There's a great website called Shelters United that has a vet of record toolkit, and I would recommend anyone without a current veterinarian check that out. There's example contracts that you can bring to your local vets or the vet 2 hours away, just some other ideas.
And Angel, just coming back to the foster home piece of it, like foster home is one of your pathways, right? And so, I always think about like what Dr. Colleen had mentioned just right out of the gate is decreasing that length of stay, that the longer pets are there at your shelter, the more susceptible they are to exposure disease and that sort of thing. And I think of things like neonatal kittens who are highly susceptible to disease right out of the gate. Like at the shelter that I came from before joining Best Friends, like any neonatal kitten went directly into foster placement. Like we just fast tracked them through into that process because if they were in our shelter, they were likely going to get sick. And so we would do that. And so not only did we use that as a pathway and it quickly identified them as a pathway to move them quickly, we also identified that as a need so we could recruit the types of volunteers that we needed to create that pathway for. And so that's why what Faith said with the medical cases, I'm a big fan of medical because those tend to be longer stay animals while you're trying to get them healthy enough to get adopted into a home. So I think foster can be especially valuable for some of those that are going to be around for a little bit that need a little extra TLC and the time that the fosters can actually put into them.
Also, one thing that we have here in Delaware, which I've not had this before, this is new to me here in Delaware, but we have what's called a herd manual. And so like a doctor, Dr. Wood, has written this entire manual. It has every single protocol in it for URI, diarrhea, pan-luke, parvo, you name it, like just kitten regular diarrhea, what to do on an intake, things like that. So just anything that you can have in writing that you can have for your med techs to be able to utilize and your fosters, then it's just a real easy way to not have to worry about if you have a veterinarian right there the second the foster feels like, oh my gosh, the kitten's dying. No, the kitten got dewormed today. So what you're seeing is actually normal. And this is why, and things like that. So anything that you can have in writing that you can give to fosters to make them feel good, like today your kitten was dewormed. The kitten tonight might have loose stool. The kitten might have what looks like spaghetti coming out of their bottom. Things like that. I don't eat spaghetti and I don't eat rice anymore just because of all of the worm language that we have to talk about. So yeah. But yeah, just anything that you can give in writing to help your fosters feel comfortable. The more fosters you can get, the more capacity you get. And it doesn't have to only be medical fosters. It can, healthy fosters still get dewormed. They still need to have that knowledge as well.
Thank you. So we have one question in the Q&A, and I just want to remind everybody, please drop questions in the Q&A because we do want to answer your questions. So Stephanie's asking, how do your organizations handle high foster numbers with insurance companies for liability?
You want me to go at that, Brent? Okay. So the way that we deal with it at any of the shelters that I've been at, we actually have waivers that the fosters sign. We're not telling them that we know everything about the behavior or the physical of the animal, that they cannot take them to dog parks, they cannot take them around other animals, you know, all of the different exceptions that they can and cannot do. But in all the cases all the shelters that I have worked at, we have these waivers so that our insurance companies feel comfortable with letting us go ahead and foster out animals without the liability on the insurance company. But it is unfortunately sometimes a dog attacks another dog, and you know, we try to work with like those cases without going through our insurance company.
Thank you, Faith. We do have another question in the Q&A. So for adult adoptable dogs and cats without medical concerns, we sometimes feel hesitant to send them to fosters because they very rarely get adopted from foster, and we worry it'll only increase their length of stay. How do we start to build out adoption from foster?
Events. Let's do special events. I tell you what, you can go to any winery, any brewery, PetSmart, Petco. Let's get events going. That's your shelter. The shelter has to do that. It's a big responsibility of the shelter. We've had some great events. Cincinnati Animal Humane that actually has done a really good stuff where they're doing them in the parking lot. They'll do Foster Saturday, and they'll bring all of their foster dogs, not all, but like, you know, 10 to 20, and they'll sit in the parking lot spaced apart so that the dogs can't fight with each other or anything like that. And then fosters get adopted, and then the best part of it is those fosters go back in and pick another dog to go home and foster. So you get one adopted and you get another one out to foster same day.
And I think in addition to that, I think giving the fosters the ability to do their own adoptions and not micromanaging that process can be very valuable to it. But the other thing that I'll say is like this is part of the pathway planning process. Like if you know you can move an animal very quickly from your shelter and like the first day it goes on the adoption floor, it's going to get adopted. Like you don't need to pathway plan that through a foster home. You can just pathway plan that for adoption. And so this is where, you know, really having an idea and a plan in place for how this animal is most likely to find its home is your best solution for it. And sometimes, you know, we used to have fosters who would be upset that they couldn't foster the small fluffy dog. And I'm like, I don't need your help for that one. Like they're going to be gone tomorrow. But here's how you can best help us. And, you know, if you don't want to foster small fluffy dogs, here's a litter of kittens. So like being sure that your foster base understands where you need the help and why you need the help.
One thing I wanted to add here that we've started doing or promoting at different shelters is offsite population rounds. So, you know, we talked about daily population rounds as a way to look at every animal every day. And so, you know, some of our centers struggle just like other shelters where animals go in foster and just what happens, who knows? And so using the same systematic approach, and we don't necessarily do it every day. It might be once a week, it might be twice a week, right? Because the urgency is not the same as getting those animals out the door, but we still don't want them to get lost in the system. And so a systematic approach of having the right people in the room and going through all of the animals that are in your care, but not necessarily in your building, and asking the same things. Who are you? How are you? What do you need? And what do you need on an individual basis? Do you need to get scheduled for spay and neuter? Do you need a different pathway? Have you been in foster for a year and no one's heard from you? Do you need to be outcomed? Whatever the answer to those questions are, but we take the same daily rounds approach, but we do it at typically a table around some pizza. And that's one approach to making sure they don't get lost in the mix.
That's really good. And I know we had some comments in the chat that maybe Brent can speak to a little bit more, but Brittany mentioned that, you know, there's Trello boards that you can add foster animals to and make this link public, sharing on social. And so there's a question as to what is Trello. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit as far as how that's been helpful in promoting animals for foster, for adoption, and different opportunities?
I'm happy to answer. I don't personally love it, but Trello is a software program that basically allows multiple people to view like individual animals. And so you can create a listing of these are the animals in our care. This is these are the ones that we need foster for, and allow people to go in and select that. I know a lot of organizations do this for animals that they're transferring. So the transferring organizations can select animals. So there's a streamlined version that's free for shelters to be able to use. I find it to be a little bit cumbersome from time to time, but it is something that a lot of people find a lot of value in, that aren't me.
Thank you, Brent. So
We-
Brent is
we-
known for
we
having
tried
some
to-
phenom- oh,
sorry.
sorry.
We
Yeah.
tried to use Trello at APA, but we did also find it very cumbersome, because you have to also remove the animal. So it's like it's just a lot of pieces that have to happen in there. But depending on what shelter software you have, Shelter Love, Pet Point, I'm not going to talk about Chameleon because I don't want to get in trouble. But Shelter Love and Pet Point are two very useful pieces of software that the animals do get automatically fed to different pieces of like Pet Finder, different platforms. The other thing also is that's really good is to try like shelter skip days. Put some Adopt Me vests on the dogs as they go out. We have cute backpacks that say like, you can smile at me, I'm on a shelter skip day, you know, things like that. There also can be called slumber parties. There's so many different names for all of it. But getting your dogs just out and about. I personally just got a dog adopted yesterday because it went on a shelter skip day on Sunday. And the woman was just so enthralled with the dog. She's come back every single day, and I convinced her to adopt the dog yesterday. So now the dog is at home. So John Marston is now at home. But things like that where people don't have to commit 100% right away, but they get to hang out with that animal makes them happy.
Brent, did you want to add something?
No, I did not. Sorry.
Okay. All right, thank you. So we do have more questions and we're doing pretty good with time. So I'm going to go ahead and answer or ask a couple more of these. So how do you go about fostering behavioral animals or more intensive medical fosters? So those with heart murmurs, FIV positive, etc.
I can answer the medical side. I mean, I feel like that might be in my lane a bit. So I think a reframe that our industry at large, I think, has room for improvement on is what adoptable means. And so when we think about who is an adoptable pet, do they have to be perfect in every way to be available to go home with someone? So when I think about things like FIV, heart murmur, I'm not sure what I'm worried about there in those particular cases, like chronic medical illnesses. They're as far as sending those to foster, we just send them to foster. We don't really have to do much more, right? They don't need those particular cases probably don't even have daily medications they need. And so who gets to go to foster? Definitely those animals can go to foster. And I think especially FIV, like reframing, like we have new information now, like FIV cats live pretty normal lifespans, and the ability for them to transmit to other cats is actually like pretty rare and like a cohesive household where everyone's getting along. And so just rethinking some of these things. You can do things like medical disclaimers. You know, we want to be transparent about what we know about the animal. And I think that falls in the behavior category as well. We don't want to hide things, but we also don't want to come to conclusions for other people about what they are willing to take on or what they're capable of. And so I think this goes back to being transparent, trusting our community, and not getting in our own way, right? So some of these cases, FIV, they're just adopted like regular cats. The 18-year-old Chihuahua with a heart murmur, oh my gosh, there's people lining up out the door for those things. Just let them go. And so I think just reframing who is available, who is adoptable. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of a home. Like just some of these concepts where we can like reframe. And as far as foster in particular, like preparing them, right? So like if you send home an 18-year-old Chihuahua, no matter whether it has a heart murmur or not, we all know that it'll either have 1 more year or 10 more years, depending on what flavor of Chihuahua you're dealing with. But just being honest and transparent and letting people decide what they're willing to take on.
I think for behavior, it's just really important that first off, your staff understand what the behavior is. A lot of our behavior cases that we send to foster can be, I'm just scared of men. I'm just scared of women. I'm just scared of other dogs. I just don't like children. So you just need to understand first off what your behavior issue is. And then you need to be very, very, very clear with the foster person that's going to take that animal of what it is. And then somebody that they can contact when there's issues, when there's concerns. Most shelters have somebody that knows that one animal. It may not be a behaviorist, it may not be, like your enrichment coordinator, not everybody has all of those, but somebody has made a connection enough to keep that animal alive at the shelter that wants to get it into foster. So I personally love the small, mean Chihuahuas. And so when people want to foster that, I can talk to them about, okay, hey, when you hand it off, turn it around, hand it butt first, don't reach for its face, things like that. There also are your big pit bulls that, hey, this pit bull might not like children, most likely doesn't like children because children are probably like some of our cases that we get up here, children were throwing rocks at their faces, things like that. So we talk about no children. It's just really being super concrete with them and having somebody that they can connect with to talk about what the behavior may be and what they may or may not see in the home and what preventions they need to go ahead and have.
And if I can add, like on the behavior side of things, like depending on the resources your shelter has, a foster home may not be the best pathway for a behavior challenge animal. Like at our shelter, we found out that our playgroup program was better equipped to deal with some of these dogs that might be a little more dog selective than a lot of our foster homes were because they were going to get that socialization that they needed in a more controlled environment. And so, I think in a lot of cases, depending on your resources, you may or may not choose that behavior as a route that you would go through foster, and maybe some of those stay on site. So just kind of work with what you have and what you all are good at.
I mean, I
Go
agree
ahead.
with you Brent, on that for sure. I do think you have to look at like quality of life, like what is that animal's quality of life happening in the shelter? Because that becomes a big piece of it too. Is living in the shelter the best bet for that animal? Or, is it going into a foster home and gonna get better? We don't know. But let's try maybe on some of them.
I think the only thing I wanted to add was when we look at behavior, remembering that behavior in the shelter is not necessarily reflective of the behavior in the home. And it's hard to remember that. I find myself as guilty as anyone when I see, the barrier frustrated dog lunging and they're just so kennel stressed. And it's hard to see the vision of like, how could this be any different? But what we know as fact and as proven by the data is what they do in the shelter doesn't look anything like what they do in the home. And that's for better or worse. And so trying to use your crystal ball is not always the most helpful exercise, but you might, just like we're saying, to both Brent and Faith's point, we might do a one night out and use it as a fact-finding mission. You might have your go-to foster that is trustworthy and has a long track record of being okay with dogs that we're unsure of. And you send them to foster for a night and then you bring them back and then look again. So trying not to jump to conclusions, try to find out facts and trying not to predict the future. It's like a combination of lots of these things.
Thank you. We're still progressing pretty good on time. I know we have some more questions in the Q&A. So I do want to quickly touch on the next one, which is in there. And it's, what system do your organizations use to track pathways?
To track pathways?
I think for pathway planning.
Okay. I mean, we have like a foster on deck system. And so when an animal comes in and it meets, like, obviously neonates are always top of the list. Neonates go to foster right away. And then we also have like, who wants a small dog, who wants a senior dog, who wants these things. So we have foster on deck lists so that when that animal walks in, we're able to quickly call a foster and say, hey, we've got this. We also, like I said earlier, have those conversations at the front desk with, you cared enough about this animal to bring it to us? Do you care? Can you please help us care enough to like take it home with you? as part of the pathway planning, and then we can keep working with them. But Foster on Deck is a big tool to be able to use. And it's a system, I mean, for us, it's just a Excel spreadsheet. There's not like a formalized thing. Shelter Love or Pet Point don't have like a place to put that.
And sometimes if you're doing it right up front, as soon as the animal hits your shelter, then the pathway's kind of already chosen because you chose to send it directly into foster. You chose where it's going on the adoption floor. You chose which rescue group you're going. Like if you start off that process very quickly, most of them are self-identifying which pathway that they're on based on where they're located in the shelter or within your community.
I think, yeah, when you're starting this, it feels nebulous and confusing. It feels like this abstract concept that doesn't make any sense. So finding a place to start that makes sense for you. So what this could look like is an attribute in your shelter software that just shows internally. On Shelter Love, this is fairly easy to do. And it might say pathway, you might give it a number, pathway 1, we'll just call it as an abstract. And your staff all knows if they see pathway 1, there's a checklist items of things that need to happen for pathway 1. And so what that could mean is like, this animal, its pathway is adoption, maybe fast track adoption, whatever, but you probably don't need marketing on that list, right? These pets are usually just going to get out of there on their own. You just put them on your regular website, they get spayed and neutered, they get their vaccines, and then they're gone. What you might find is that fast track dog is still there on day 10. So now they're not a fast track dog anymore. They're now a slow track dog, and you change the attribute and now it says pathway 2. And then everyone on your staff knows if they see pathway 2, here's the checklist we're using. And so at day 10, it might say things like, maybe we send a foster, maybe we do a marketing push. It depends on like what length of stay looks like right for you right now to determine what these things mean. But having something concrete, either built into your shelter software or whatever system you're using, and having everyone know what that means and what that means for that animal can be an okay place to start. And if you're really lost, you can start with just checklist items in general. So like if you're here for 0 days, you get this checklist. If you're here for 14 days, you get this checklist. As just like a basic place to start.
Thank you, Dr. Colleen. So Brent is, speaks at numerous conferences that we have and always has some really good quotes. And so there was a quote that we had recently that we had shared on one of our social media channels, which is, "Shelters are most likely to get the outcome they plan for." Hope I got that right, Brent. Will you please share more about what that means and expand on that for this group?
Yeah, so I always tell people that success in this isn't an accident. You generally get the outcome that you plan for. And I think sometimes when I'm talking to
I think Brent's frozen for a moment. Hopefully he'll be back in just 1 second.
Brent, come back.
Brent, come back. It was that impactful of a quote that it just froze everything. So while we wait for Brent to return, I will keep on chatting a little bit. So we do have, at the end of this presentation, we're going to share an upcoming resource for you all. But since we do have a little bit more time, just kind of checking back and seeing that, this is a great team. You guys will receive a questionnaire at the end of this call. Please do fill that out. And hopefully we can get back to you with any additional questions that you all might have. And I think Brent will come back in a minute. But on kind of a lightish note, Faith, for you, any guidance on recruiting and retaining fosters, knowing that they play
Yeah,
such a big role in pathway?
Yeah, I was just looking at that Q&A. So, one of the things that people, when I'm talking to people about fostering, people think, oh, if I foster it, I have to foster it long term. I think it's better to talk to people about, hey, can you foster, like Dr. Colleen said, can we foster for overnight? Get us some notes about this animal. Can you foster for the weekend? Can you foster for a week? Can you foster for 2 weeks? Like, don't make it sound like you're taking this animal home and have to foster it until it's finally adopted. Obviously, there are different cases. I mean, the neonates, you're going to have them for, I only keep my neonates for 4 weeks. It's just a given because once they can start eating food, they have to get out of my house because my Great Dane eats their food instead. So they have to leave. So like just having expectations of what the fostering looks like, being very upfront about it, and also not judging the foster because they do bring it back. I see so many places where like, oh, we have a foster dump today. No, we don't have a foster dump. They fostered that animal for us for the last week that we didn't have to have it at the shelter. And now they're bringing it to us with a whole bunch of notes. And now we can talk about what this animal really needs. For recruitment, I always tell everybody go sit in front of PetSmart, go sit in front of Petco, Walmart, go paper cars at Walmart, HEB, like anywhere like that. People want to help, they just don't know how to help. Make sure you have really good campaigns out there for how to increase fostering. Like I said, people want to help, they just need to know how to help.
Thank you, Faith. And to your point, I mean, even a short period of time in a foster home, we learn so much about that animal. And it can be very temporary. It can just be, overnight, a week or so, but it gives us a chance to learn more about that animal and get them better prepared for when it comes, the time for adoption comes. So, Brent, thank you for coming back. Go ahead, Faith. You want to say something else?
Sorry about that.
We're glad you're back, Brent. So we were talking about your quote.
Oh yeah. So I always say that success isn't an accident. You get the outcome that you most likely get the outcome that you plan for. And one of the things that I think it's important for people to realize is sometimes the decisions that we don't make are also a pathway. And so I often talk to shelters and it's like, hey, we've got this dog that may be somewhat questionable in behavior. I'm not sure that I want to post it for adoption because what if I have to euthanize it? Or I don't want to schedule this for a spay and neuter surgery because what if I have to euthanize it and then I've wasted that spay and neuter opportunity? And when you're making decisions like that, like you are basically pathway planning that animal towards the euthanasia rim. And I think we need to be cognizant of the decisions that we make, that we should be pathway planning them for the best possible outcome. Maybe you don't always get that. Like I know that everybody is struggling on space and time, and that may not always be the may not always happen for you. But if your pathway towards a positive outcome, you're more likely to get the positive outcome. And if you're pathway planning towards what happens if it's a negative outcome, that's the most likely outcome that you're probably going to get for that individual animal. And so plan for what you want as the outcome for that pet, because that's what's most likely going to happen.
There's a lot of comments asking about, do we save cage space for fosters? Do we save cage space for potential returns? You don't want to tie up your cage space because you think you might have a return. You don't want to hold them up because you might have an adoption return or a foster return. What you want to do is plan like, okay, I know that I'm sending this neonate kitten out. It may come back, but I have this backup list of other kitten or other fosters that will come and take this kitten. And unfortunately, we're going to get returns. Everybody gets returns. I've had 3 already today at Brandywine Valley. We don't have anywhere to put them. I'm shoveling dogs everywhere, moving everything around to make space. You want to hope that everything works good. If you set yourself up for negative, then you may have a day where you have these empty kennels that you couldn't help somebody else that really needed you because you were saving space for something else. And what you want to do is plan ahead with, hey, so I know that I adopted out this kitten, or I adopted out this dog, or I adopted out whatever, or I fostered it out, and it may or may not come back, but here's my backup plan if it does. We have a dog that came back today that we knew probably would come back, and we already have somebody coming to get it because we already had that plan there for it.
Thank you, Faith. We have some really great questions still in the Q&A, but we're getting close to time. So we do want to continue this discussion. You guys have some great questions. We have some answers. We will give you some of our contact information. You already saw the Best Friends Network email. But wanted to go back to our presentation, Kayla, because Dr. Colleen and the National Medicine team have some exciting opportunities coming up that I'd love for you to talk about a little bit more, Dr. Colleen.
Yeah, there's a few QR codes here. So the first QR code, request help here, and our email is where you can just request assistance from us. So this can look, typically it starts out with some sort of virtual consults, or we can help answer questions, and we talk about all sorts of things from population management, disease prevention, disease outbreaks, etc. There's also this little bank of spay-neuter resources for both veterinarians and shelter staff. And the QR code on the bottom can be super helpful for, like Faith was talking about, having this protocol library. So these are medical protocols that are templates. And basically you just plug and play your organization's information in them. There's options for those of you that have a veterinarian and your veterinarian can sign off. And there's options in there for those of you that don't have a veterinarian and you want just to have a basic protocol library for your shelter staff. So please use those. Please reach out to us. We are here as a resource. And then we do have some upcoming population management webinar series. And so I think they're going to drop the link to the register in the chat. But they are over the next few Wednesdays. Some other wonderful veterinarians from our team, Dr. Aaron and Dr. Becca, will be presenting more at-length content about just exactly what we've been talking about today. So the nitty-gritty of how do we pathway plan and how do we implement daily rounds at our orgs to move animals through our sheltering systems quicker and in a way that promotes animal welfare.
Thank you. And Kayla did go ahead and dropped the link in chat. So please, everybody take advantage of that. These are some great resources and some really great presentations. And on behalf, of course, of the network team, many of you are already network partners, again, 5,000 and growing, and we'd love to connect with you all. We have numerous webinars, numerous resources. If you're not a network partner, please apply to become one. It's a very quick process. You'll have access to a lot of our social media accounts, of course, different webinars, different, if we have any kind of special activities, any events, etc. So please, these are our handles for Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course our website. And as I mentioned before, please take a moment to answer our quick questionnaire because we want to make improvements and keep, providing the support possible for you all. And then also you see that there's our network email is there. So please do take advantage of it. Please email us, message us. These questions that are in Q&A, please, Connie and everybody else who did not get to your questions, please send those over to either the network team or the shelter medicine team. But just a huge thank you to our panelists today. Dr. Colleen, thank you so much. Brent and Faith. Appreciate all of your help and support and everybody for attending today. So have a wonderful rest of your day and look forward to continuing this journey with all of you. All right, take care. Bye.